So we've got another article about DirectX 12 that has come out from a DirectX 12 developer. And I know that we've talked about this several times in the past, but there are some new pieces of information in here that I thought you would want to know about. This is coming from Brad Wardell. He's the CEO of Stardock. If anybody knows or understands DirectX 12 and the importance of CPU and multi-threading, it's probably going to be this guy, because he was the first person to create a commercial game where the AI used multi-threading. So this guy is one of the people who figured it out. So first off, you hear people continuously copy and paste that DX12 isn't going to do anything for consoles because consoles are already, quote, close to the metal. How many times have you heard that repeated? And that it's only going to make PC development closer to the metal, so it's only going to benefit PC. And to that argument, Brad says, shut the hell up. This isn't about being closer to the metal. He says we're way beyond that at this point. He says the game changer with DX12 is how the CPU and GPU communicate. With DirectX 9, one CPU talked to the GPU. With DirectX 10, they improved it a little bit and allowed devs to use multiple cores to send jobs to the GPU. But the pipeline was serialized, so you could still only have one CPU talking to the GPU. And then flash forward today, NVIDIA just released a GTX 970 card, which he says has 5.2 billion transistors on it, thousands of cores inside this card. And with DirectX 11, the current version that's out, they still can only talk to one of them at a time. So all these cores are in this system and it's DX12 ready, but currently they can still only talk to one core at a time primarily. With DirectX 12, you're going to be able to theoretically use all your cores to talk to the GPU simultaneously. So you're going from one core talking to the GPU at a time to multiple cores talking to the GPU at the same time. Now, he claims he's been in non-NDA meetings with other developers where they are freely able to talk about what they've learned and how they're progressing. And he says a lot of devs are actually afraid to state the real-world performance games simply because they sound almost unbelievable. He said he's seen people say that they had gains of 40%, but in actuality, they were drastically understating the gains and that the results went far beyond that 40%. He also talked about how photorealism in games currently isn't possible simply because of light sources. And oftentimes in games, like with lighting, you'll see an explosion, for instance, happen on screen, but the flames or the light from that explosion, you don't see that bounce off the walls or other objects. You just see an explosion happen. But that's not what would happen in the real world. And the way you see things, the way the light bounces off atoms that you're looking at, that is very hard to replicate in video games right now because currently developers are very limited into how many lighting sources they can actually add to games. Currently, they are limited to 4 light sources because lighting is very taxing on the system. But going from something like we're currently at to a DX12 or a Mantle is definitely going to add more lighting sources, which means your games are going to look more realistic when these developers get this down pat. So what do you think is holding games back? Do you think it's the GPU or the CPU? Because we've heard a lot of people talk about the importance of the GPU, and I'm not denying that the GPU isn't important, but according to Brad, he has never seen a modern NVIDIA card become GPU bound. He says almost all games are CPU bound, which is of course what DirectX 12 and Mantle plan on fixing. But you do have to keep in mind that in order for games to take full advantage of the system, they do need to be built from the ground up with DX12 and Mantle in mind. And upgrading the system, might help some, but it's not going to give you the full benefits until you see games that are built from the ground using these technologies. But Brad and many others have stated that they do believe the transition is going to happen pretty quickly. And that's simply because you'd be crazy as a developer to not want to see some of these improvements in your game. I mean, do you want to build a game where you have one core talking to the GPU at one time, or do you want to have multiple cores talking to the GPU at the same time? And looking at the recent Xbox SDK leaks that's been coming out over the last couple of weeks, I don't believe anybody can deny now what I've been telling you for forever. I've been saying it for years, that the SDK wasn't ready for the Xbox's launch. How many devs have we had that stated that? And the SDK still isn't ready. They're still updating it and unlocking stuff for devs, and they were doing it right up until the end of 2014. And no doubt there's plenty more to come in 2015, which of course some people had speculated that 2015 was supposed to be the actual real launch of the Xbox One. So they took the system and patched it to make it work with the current gen tech, but I think all signs obviously point towards transitioning to Windows 10 and DX12. And even though a lot of people claimed in the beginning that this was some afterthought, I told you at the time that I didn't think it was, and I definitely don't think it was an afterthought now. This has been in the works for a long time. And considering how good games looked at launch with a gimped SDK for devs, I gotta say I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do once all the cards have been played. Now, this does not mean that Sony and PS4 are going to be standing still. Brad mentions that he believes Sony is also going to work on trying to get their API to do something very similar. So the ultimate question is, who planned more for the future? The DirectX 12 developer ended his blog by saying, keep a close eye on GDC this year, which by the way happens in early March, so mark your calendars for that. He says, quote, something is about to happen. Something wonderful. He also says that the first game built from the ground up using DX12 or Mantle will be revealed this year. So, as a PC and Xbox gamer and a soon-to-be PS4 gamer, I've got one coming in the mail, should be here in the next few days. I'm certainly excited to see how this ends up. If it ends up being half of what the experts say it could bring, I will be a happy gamer. So if you want to read more about it, links down in the description box. Stay tuned right here to this channel and to VGN, and follow me on Twitter for breaking news. Post below, let me know, what do you think about DX12? That does it for me, the Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.